You're now watching Sports Bettor's Paradise on the Bet Rivers Network.
All right, Jimmy, Ott and Paul Stone with our best bets. Let's get right to it, Paul. Let's start in the SEC. We talked about the big wins in Alabama, LSU, and Ole Miss in Georgia earlier in the week. Let's go to Mississippi State and Tennessee, because when we talk about this one, it'll be the big one next week. That's right, Tennessee at Georgia in Athens next week. Look ahead spot, maybe. Mississippi State catching 24, the total 61 here in Rocky Top.
Yeah, Jimmy, Mississippi State, I think inarguably they're the 16th best team in the 16-team SEC this year, but the Bulldogs have certainly displayed incremental improvement over the course of the season, especially since true freshman quarterback Michael Van Buren installed as the starter following a season-ending injury to their former starter Blake Shapen on the season. Van Buren, a former Oregon commit, he's thrown for over 1,300 yards, completed 57% of his throws, averages almost 8 yards an attempt, 9 touchdowns against just 4 interceptions. So he's played very well. 2 games ago, Mississippi State kind of took a step back. They were blasted at home by Arkansas, 58-25. But if you look at the previous 3 games against 3 top 10 level opponents, Texas, Georgia, and Texas A&M, Mississippi State in those games covered inflated point spreads comfortably. Their defense, that's obviously an issue here. Their defense, not very good. One of the worst defenses probably in the entire Power 4 structure. Give up 38 points a game, over 482 yards a game, rank in the bottom 10 in the entire FBS in both of those team statistical categories. But there is a little bit of good news, maybe. Tennessee's offense, not quite as prolific this season as it has been in recent years. The Volunteers in 5 SEC games, they've only averaged 21.6 points per game in regulation. So not nearly as prolific. Also, a little note here, double-digit dogs in the SEC this season, now 15-2 against the spread. So double-digit dogs have been profitable in the Southeastern Conference. And you mentioned it, but I really like the scheduling spot here for Mississippi State. Tennessee has that trip to Georgia on deck. So one eye could certainly be on Athens in terms of the Volunteers' perspective. 24 is a lot of points. I'll take them. Mississippi State plus 24 over Tennessee.
Home favorites in the SEC in conference play also. It's like 4 or 5 and 15 this year. So for whatever reason, we talked about the home field advantage as well, and with the value, with the odds makers have put on it. And these, let's face it, Neyland Stadium, they may put a point spread value on it. Well, trust me, there's a lot of difference between the crowd and the home field advantage against Mississippi State and against Alabama in that same building. As just like LSU against Ole Miss or Alabama, and against UCLA and Nicholls State. So, yeah, this is not exactly where they're going to be super juiced up when Mississippi State comes in as 24-point underdogs. Don't forget our friends at Bet Rivers. You can earn a chance at $10,000 in bonus money with the Bet Rivers prop packs. Place NBA same-game parlays to collect player card prop packs and earn rewards. You win based on how your player performs. Log into BetRivers.com or on the BetRivers app to place your bet and get your prop pack today. Let's go to the Big Ten in Penn State and Washington. And all of the nasty exchange between Franklin and the fan leaving, and Franklin fails again against a top 5 or top 10 team. And that's all. I get it. But this is where Penn State is going to make it into the 12-team playoff or not. It's not going to be on Ohio State. It's now the rest of the season. And like we said, this 12-team playoff is designed almost for James Franklin and Penn State. They would have been, last 10 years, they would have been in the playoff the majority of the time. And they're favored to do so as well. Back in their comfort zone, at home, against an inferior roster. 13.5, 45.5 against Washington. Washington, first year in the Big Ten, 3-0 at home. They won against USC. They benefited from 3 Miller Moss interceptions. He's since been benched at USC by Lincoln Riley now that they dip under 500. But on the road, Washington is 0-3 straight up and 0-3 against the spread. comfort zone spot here for James Franklin, and so if he's in position, he'll cover that spread as well. But Penn State in a spot, little emotional win for Washington against USC, now traveling on the road where they've had real difficulties this year. I'm taking Penn State minus 13.5, Paul.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, these are the type of games over the last decade where Penn State's been very productive. They've not only defeated the teams on their schedule that they should, but they've typically covered. And you added that golden caveat. James Franklin will definitely, if he's near the goal line at the 2, say towards the end of the game, and the other team's out of timeouts, he's probably not going to be kneeling it. He'll probably push it in if he needs that to get over the 12.5. So, yeah, I certainly like your position there on the Nittany Lions on Saturday.
All right, let's get to your next pick in Boise State at home, 24.5 and 61.5 on the Smurf turf against the Wolfpack of Nevada. Well, you see what when they try and stack the line against Genty. I mean, the Madsen had a field day, 4 first-half touchdowns against San Diego State, showing their balance, and so that makes Genty that much more effective when you can do that. So Genty had 191 yards a game here. So the first playoff that comes out, maybe Boise, a little extra motivation for some style points here. Paul, I'm trying to predict your angle here because you like the Broncos at home.
And that's certainly part of it, the style points, without question, of being in the Mountain West. You mentioned their quarterback, Madsen. He, in the offseason, everybody thought Malachi Nelson, the former 5-star recruit who transferred in from Southern Cal, would be the guy. But Madsen's done a great job for the Broncos. One loss, Boise State, looking at it from an overall playoff perspective, they're certainly in the driver's seat right now to get the group of 5 bid in the playoff. 4 more regular season victories and then another in the Mountain West Championship game. And they'll be among the entrants in college football's 12-team playoff without question. You look back to week 2, and although it fell short on the scoreboard, Boise, I think that was the most impressive single game performance by a group of 5 team this season, when Boise went to Alston Stadium in Eugene, Oregon, actually led the Ducks 34-27 with just over 10 minutes to go. Oregon comes back, wins the game 37-34, but a great performance for Boise. You mentioned Ashton Genty. He had 192 yards in that game on 25 carries, so almost 200 yards against the Ducks. They really showed up well there. And although Boise certainly has a clear path to the playoff, I think that the Broncos clearly have designs on one of the 4 first-round byes in the playoffs. And the 4 highest-rated conference champions will get those byes. And certainly, even though they're in the Mountain West, they have a shot. They're certainly in that conversation at the moment. But playing in the historically weak Mountain West, I do believe, even though they might kind of underemphasize the importance of style points and margin of victory, I think style points matter. I think Boise State's going to score as much as they can score. I think they're going to win by as much as they can win by, and they should. This Nevada team they're facing on Saturday, they have a slew of injuries on both sides of the ball. I think Boise's going to win this by 4 touchdowns or more. I like Boise minus 24.5 over Nevada.
Paul, let's just say I would think, I know you do your own power ratings, I would have Boise State favored over BYU, who sits atop the Big 12 right now. I know that doesn't mean the pollsters or the committee will have them, but I think on a neutral site, Boise State would be favored. Is that what you have?
I'm not looking. I'm just thinking off of the top of my head. I think it'd probably be close to pick. I'm just trying to think where I've got. I think I've got BYU just outside the top 10, and I think Boise might be right up against them one way or the other. So I think that would be a close call. It'd definitely be less than 2.5 or lower either way.
Yeah, I wouldn't have either. I'd have either one of them. I would have Boise a point or 2 in that one. Don't forget that players at BetRivers can place same-game parlays on college football and NFL games to earn squares. Our exclusive Squares offers additional chances at profit boost, bonus bets, and many $10,000 jackpots. Visit BetRivers.com or the BetRivers app for more details. Let's get to my next pick, and we're going to the ACC. And Clemson, man, they ran into a buzzsaw, and this is not a left field for Louisville because they have really struggled against the spread. But this was This was not as close as the final score. I mean, they put this thing away early and just kind of cruise. So sometimes those box scores can be a little bit deceiving in sort of these games that are out of reach early. And you look back at Clemson, I'd say, well, they've been a bully this year. And what we're saying about bully is they've beaten weaker teams really badly. Here's their wins. App State. Now, NC State, I say because NC State was playing so poorly at the time that they played them. Stanford, Florida State, Wake Forest, Virginia. Not exactly murderer's row. This is a better team than all of those teams. And they're playing at Blacksburg, where it's really tough to play. This line has been teetering between 6.5 and 7. Currently at Bet Rivers, it's 6.5. That's fine if 7, but put a little extra on it. But I like the Hokies plus the 6.5. Home dog here against Clemson, who also has to be a little bit bent. And I have to be fair now. A lot of teams, down at like USC, when their goals were done and you saw some of those players start to pull out or red shirt, whatever you want to call it, that was a sign, hey, look, they may be drifting a little bit as far as their focus the rest of the season now that some of their goals are not there. Dabo's been pretty good in this spot when his team has been knocked out of major consideration. He has been pretty good, but still, that's a factor that may come into play as well. I'll take the Hokies plus the points at home, Paul.
Yeah, and again, I mean, first of all, Virginia Tech got some good news yesterday. It was reported their quarterback, Kyron Drones, who's been banged up a little bit, practiced and was at full strength, and their running back, Tutton, as well. It looks like he's good to go, their primary ball carrier. So that's good news for Virginia Tech, and one of the tougher places to play in all of college football. And like you pointed out, I mean, Clemson, the 2 games where they've gone up against quality opponents, Clemson in the season opener there in Atlanta, and then last week at home against Louisville, they have fallen short. And I really was unimpressed mostly with Louisville prior to that quote-unquote beatdown on Saturday night. They had not played all that well. I'd kind of expected more out of the Cardinals, but boy, they showed up in grand fashion there in Death Valley Saturday night. And just like you said, it was they were in control from the get-go, and Clemson took a step back. So I like Virginia Tech as well, and certainly support your position there.
All right, let's get to your next pick and go to Corvallis, Oregon. Oregon State at 4-4, 355.5 over the visiting San Jose State Spartans, who are 5-3 on the season. Oregon State was off to a good start, 4-1. They've lost 3 in a row coming into this one. I'm curious, what's your angle on this one, Paul?
This is kind of a head scratcher, and this is all about the numbers. Sometimes I'll make a play based on discrepancy in numbers, and that's what this is. By this point in the season, I make point spreads on all the games on Saturday night and Sunday morning before the openers come out. And by this point in the season, we've got, 7, 8, 9, how many ever data points on each team. My number is going to be really close to the sports book in just about every instance. There are some exceptions, and this was one. I actually made Oregon State a 7-point favorite here. It's 3. This game is being played in Corvallis, as you mentioned, at Reser Stadium. And although the value of the home field advantage can vary from handicapper to handicapper, I think the standard right now throughout the industry is roughly 3 points. So Oregon State being a 3-point home favorite essentially implies that these teams have an equal power rating, that it would be pick 'em on a neutral field. However, besides my own power ratings, I reference 3 or 4 other power rating systems that I respect, and all of us have Oregon State rated ahead of San Jose State. In some cases, 10 or 12 spots, even 15 spots, I think, in one instance. So a little bit of a head scratcher, which is a little bit concerning. Oregon State does have some issues at quarterback. Giovanni McCoy in their last game, a 44-7 loss at California, got benched in the first half and was replaced by former starter Ben Gulbranson. But both quarterbacks are healthy. It's not a health issue. It's just a question of who will play quarterback for the Beavers. But I just think, again, I think Oregon State's the better team. I think there's value here taking them -3. So I'll expect the Beavers to win by a field goal or more, or by more than a field goal over the Spartans.
I think what you're getting here is a buy low spot, Paul, and I think that's because maybe they've lost 3 in a row, and that maybe they've lost some of the public support. So, being on this losing streak right now. But, yeah, I agree with everything you said. And I would have Oregon State a little bit higher as well than San Jose State. All right, another double barrel pick for us. So, Paul and I don't compare notes. We bring it together. Sometimes we just have the same picks. And last week we went 1-0-1 on that one. The Baylor, I was actually with some guys that had 2.5. But anyway, that Baylor with the push for most people, certainly the line that we gave out -3 last week. But we have a double barrel pick, and we both are on the Vandy South Carolina game. Vanderbilt at 6-3, South Carolina at 5-3. South Carolina going into Nashville, 3.5-point favorites. Total is now at 45.5. Vanderbilt is 3-2 in the SEC. Alabama State champs, who wins at Alabama against Alabama, at Auburn, and then at Kentucky. Their 2 losses were by 3. That's Missouri in overtime in Columbia, and against Texas at home. They're getting more points than in this game against visiting South Carolina than they've lost any conference game this year. South Carolina can be tough. We talked about the Elite 7. They are 8. They're right behind, especially at home. Field rush fade is in effect here. They went crazy after they blasted A&M in Columbia last weekend. But also, the quarterback is more consistent play. Myself, my co-host, and several other colleagues, it is not unanimous, but it is the vast majority would have Diego Pavia as our first-team All-SEC quarterback at this point. He is not going to be the pro prospect that a lot of other quarterbacks in the league, but he is certainly outplayed everyone. He's got more yards per attempt than Sellers, 8.2 to 7.3. Touchdown interception ratio, Pavia 15-3, Sellers 7-4. Rushing, Sellers has 99 yards, 4 TDs. Pavia 464 and 4 TDs. Are we still dealing with Vanderbilt, or is it just a recency bias with South Carolina, and because they looked so good last week against A&M? Vanderbilt plus a 3.5 at home, where they may have. I know they had just as many as the Texas fans when they came to town. They may have more than the Gamecock fans in this one at home.
Yeah, hopefully those Commodore fans are energized there in Nashville. I know they hadn't had much to cheer about over the last decade or so, but, led by Diego Pavia and their fourth-year head coach, Clark Lee, Vanderbilt has inarguably been one of the feel-good stories in all of college football this year. This was a team that was 3-38 straight up in SEC play in their previous 5 seasons. They've already attained bowl eligibility this year and could finish with their first winning season since 2013 with one more victory. This home game against South Carolina on Saturday, it marks the 6th game in as many SEC games this year as they've been labeled as the underdog, been the underdog in all 6 SEC games now. They've won 3 of those previous 5 SEC games outright, defeated then top-ranked Alabama 40-35 as a 23-point home underdog. Of course, they defeated Kentucky in Lexington 20-13 as a 12.5 point underdog. And then this last week, defeated Auburn in Auburn 17-7 as a 7.5 point underdog. You look at Pavia, he's a guy that out of Albuquerque didn't have many offers. Started his career at the junior college level at New Mexico Military Institute. But this guy's, the numbers, the statistics might not be as gaudy as some quarterbacks, especially the teams that throw the ball a lot. But he's just a winner. He's just a bulldog of a competitor, and he has really thrived. I know we've talked about it on the podcast, and it's been talked about throughout the college football media. But this guy is now, if you count last year when he was quarterback at New Mexico State, 11-2-1 as the betting underdog, 9 outright victories. So 11-2-1 when cast as the underdog, 9 outright victories the last 2 years as the underdog. South Carolina, as you mentioned, coming off that huge victory over Texas A&M at home there in Columbia. They were on the other side of that last week. A&M was coming off the big victory at home over LSU. A&M comes in a little bit limp. Now South Carolina defeats A&M in big fashion. They storm the field, and now they've got to go to Nashville and maybe play a Vanderbilt team that'll have a little more spark than the Gamecocks. The Gamecocks are playing well, no question about it. But sometimes I think in sports betting, you just got to ride the hot hand. And the Commodores are hot. Diego Pavia keeps delivering the money. I'll take the Commodores, Vanderbilt plus 3.5.
You know, and Saban was on game day, and McAfee said when they were talking about Nashville, he said, "Yeah, tough place to play, huh, Coach?" So he was giving it a little bit. But I have to say, it is tough to be a Vanderbilt fan. And you talk about the intangibles, not just the statistics when we talk to Pavia. And that's one thing that here, you know, in the SEC footprint, we give a lot of credit to Pavia. I mean, there's no way to evaluate, but he has lifted this team. And, I mean, you could see it from jump, Paul, when you and I were out in Las Vegas for that game against Virginia Tech. I mean, first drive of the game, man, this is a different feel. But I got to give those Vanderbilt fans credit because for being out of – their execution, when they tore down that goalpost and went right through the main entertainment district of Broadway, through the cops, they were orderly, didn't put a scratch on anybody's car, going in between cars, straight to the river. I mean, that was flawless. It was textbook. So, I mean, I think this has been a lot of fun for this Vanderbilt team. Diego Pavia, I don't know how many family members is he going to have at this one. They've been adding over the course of the season. He is fun to watch. There's no doubt about that. Poor man's Johnny Manziel, a little bit, Paul, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think that's a good comparison. And I know he styles his game after Manziel's, and he got a surprise. You probably saw that ESPN interview a few weeks, I guess, after they beat Alabama, the ESPN interview when they had Johnny pop in and
I didn't see no. Okay.
I really tickled Pavia. He was really taken aback. You could tell he didn't know that Manziel was going to come on the camera there with him, and he was really a good moment there. You know, he probably doesn't throw the ball quite as well as Manziel. You know, I still see those plays that Manziel made against Alabama.
Yeah, that's
running
fair.
around and going up in the pocket and then backwards and sideways. You know, Manziel's almost a one-of-a-kind guy. But Pavia, like you said, he just elevates the play of his teammates. I mean, these guys, a lot of them, of course, transfer portal. It's somewhat of a new roster, but some of those guys have been there for a lot of that losing. And, you know, losing becomes a habit just like winning becomes a habit. And I think he's energized not only the football program, but he's energized the student body and the city of Nashville, and they have relevance now. And hopefully, I know Clark Lee made some bold proclamations when he was hired about where he thought he could take this program, and hopefully they can use this season to catapult the Commodores into a more relevant position in college football.
Well, whatever. As a coach, as a parent, we want our kids or the players to compete. And my man competes. There's no doubt about it. Mi hombre, Diego Football. There we go. All right, we're on Vanderbilt with the double barrel play. For Paul Stone, I'm Jimmy Ott here on the Sports Bettor's Paradise on the Sports Bettors on the Bet Rivers Network.